Thank you all so much for being with us today. I'm Janice Kaminer-Resnick, and I welcome you on behalf of our leadership team here at America at a Crossroads, which is a project of Jews United for Democracy and Justice. Joining me tonight are former Congressman Mel Levine and former Los Angeles County Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky. Many thanks to Bill Kristol, whom we are so pleased to welcome back to America at a Crossroads. Thank you for honoring our loyal audience with your presence and your intelligent analysis. We are hungry for that. We also extend a warm welcome and thanks to tonight's esteemed moderator, Patt Morrison. We are all very much looking forward to hearing your conversation on tonight's topic, Speak Up and Speak Out, Bill Kristol's view on the state of the nation. Next Wednesday, New York Times political journalist Jonathan Weissman will be in conversation with Madeline Brand on the topic, American anti-Semitism, being Jewish in the age of Trump. Jonathan Weissman is a deputy Washington editor and Congress editor for the New York Times, where he covers, obviously, Congress, politics, and economics. He has also written extensively about anti-Semitism. His nonfiction bestseller, 3 parentheticals with the word Semitism in the middle, being Jewish in the age of Trump. We hope that you'll join us. It should be a very interesting conversation. A quick reminder, anyone can watch any of our weekly programs via podcast or on YouTube. All information and links to all those ways of watching or listening to our program is in our emails, or you can visit our website, JewsUnitedForDemocracy.org, or our YouTube channel, America at a Crossroads. And this bears repeating every week. Many thanks to our audience for your generous donations. It is only through your support that we can continue to provide this important programming, which has now been about, I think it's either 6 years or 7 years. I'll let you know after I look it up. And now, to lead this discussion is the illustrious Patt Morrison. She's well known to our America at a Crossroads audience. Patt has had a decades-long career as both a broadcast journalist and a columnist. She is currently with the Los Angeles Times. She has received many, many awards for her outstanding written and spoken journalistic talents. We are grateful to Patt for being part of our America at a Crossroads team. Patt, the conversation is yours.
Janice, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are joining us this evening and for your ongoing ears and eyeballs and your support of this vital program at a crossroads indeed in the story of this country, of where we have been and, of course, where we are going to be in the future as we approach the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the founding of this nation. Bill Kristol joins me. He's a popular guest here on our program, an American political analyst and commentator. He was the editor and publisher of the Weekly Standard, now editor-at-large of the publication The Bulwark, and among his books were Over Iraq, Saddam's Tyranny, and America's Mission. He's also an analyst for ABC News and always has insights that are of value and worth, well, considering, thinking about, and then putting questions to him, which we would like you to do as we approach the second half of our hour here. You can see the Q&A box, so listen to what he has to say and put your questions to Bill. We may address some of them earlier in the conversation. If not, we hope to get to some of them, if not all of them, later in our discussion. Bill, thank you so much for joining us again.
Great to be with you, Pat, and great to be with all of you again.
So many Trump stories seem to last a few days, at most a week, and then blow over because something even more interesting, scandalous, surprising comes along. The Epstein story is going on and on and on, to Trump's dismay. Many people have thought that this might be the Achilles heel for Donald Trump, the one that brings him down, because he's promised so much to his followers and now seems not to be interested in delivering at all. And yet he is fielding some of his marshals, the Deputy Attorney General, going to speak to Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted of sex trafficking and a longtime associate of Jeffrey Epstein. And so where do matters stand, both as a matter of prosecution, I suppose, and yet as Donald Trump tries to save himself from the consequences of his own words and his own promises, with some members in Congress balking at it, but other members in Congress going along with him?
Yeah, no, I've been very interested in the Epstein matter since it reemerged. I can't say I followed it. I now feel that I should have followed it more closely back in the day. I do think there's a lot of, he got a slap on the wrist originally under the Bush administration in 2008. Really, when you read more about it, the idea that he got the very mild punishment he did is horrifying. Julie Brown, the Miami Herald journalist who, did heroic work to dig into the case in 2017, 2018, really forced the reopening of it and the indictment of Epstein again, after which he died in jail, obviously, and then the indictment and conviction of Maxwell. So it's a good case study. I mean, just as stepping back from Trump, even I'd say it's not a great moment for the American justice system, honestly. And what happened is terrible. Of course, it's horrible. The treatment, what Epstein did, what Maxwell did, but all the people who enabled them, who went along, who participated, honestly, very influential people, rich and famous people, and then an awful lot of pretending they didn't know, an awful lot of covering up. I mean, who's ever seen a conspiracy of this magnitude? 1,000 girls trafficked and abused and exploited and raped, really, in many cases. And two people get indicted. I don't know. When Bernie Madoff had his financial conspiracy, I think there were many more people got indicted or named as co-conspirators. Certainly, in other kinds of, if you think about the size of this enterprise, it's not a vindication of our system. So this is a case where a lot of Trump supporters, MAGA world, had kind of slightly crazy conspiracy theories. But I've got to say, in this one case, they were onto something that I think our elites failed and the government failed. And it was covered over really and not treated taken seriously. And that's true in real time. People knew what he was doing. Well, they just had the sense of what he was doing, and they were, going along and pretending not to know. So that's my sort of. I think that's important to say that at the beginning, because I think that's one reason it stayed alive. I think a lot of people hadn't really focused on it. If you were not part of MAGA world, you thought these conspiracy theories were a little crazy. And then you sort of learn more about it, and it is kind of horrifying. And you'd sort of like to know more, the way we do about a lot of criminal cases. It's not like, we know a lot about what happened in Enron or Madoff or you name it, right? I mean, it's not, these things are not, and this one, much, much harder to get at the evidence. Obviously, for MAGA world, this was a key part of key conspiracy for them, part of QAnon, actually. And so they promised to release it. And now in that respect, they're obviously paying a big price, because they promised to release all the documents. Bondi made a big deal, and the Attorney General in February, she was going to release everything. Here are the first binders. They're going ahead. They get the 1,000 FBI agents reviewing these files. And then in May, Trump is informed in the Oval Office that you're in the files there. Of course, it's just hearsay, and Trump takes that on board, and suddenly everything stops. And 2 months later, there's that memo from the FBI and the Justice Department saying, nothing to be released. I mean, of course, that's from Trump. I mean, Trump decided that. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel didn't get together and have a deliberation about it, Trump decided he wanted nothing out. So what's in those files? People have a kind of sense that, gee, Trump is pretty worried about it, apparently, because obviously the easier way for him to go would be to release it. It was covered up by all these other administrations. I'm a guy who believes in exposing the truth. I'm, following through on my promises. He doesn't have the nerve to do that.
Well,
So that's, I think, that caused him trouble originally when that statement came out. But then he's actually compounded his problems. I put it this way: if you're going to stonewall, you need to stonewall. If you're going to do a cover up, you need to just cover it up and say, "I'm sorry, we can't release anything." I mean, if he had stuck to his original instinct, which you remember, Pat, was he said, "This is an old story. We shouldn't be invested. Why are you asking me about this? There's nothing more
but
to
then he
say."
insulted his followers for pursuing
Yeah,
it.
he insulted his followers, which was stupid. But even so, honestly, if he'd stuck to his original line, it would have been 2, 3 weeks. It would have been like these other things, I think, a little more. People would be annoyed, dissatisfied, but at the end of the day, you can't really make them do it, probably. Instead, he got a little rattled by the reaction. And so, well, we're going to go get some of the grand jury stuff. We're going to try to make it public. So ridiculous. There's nothing much in the grand jury testimony, and the judges won't let them make it public anyway. But it was like a sop. And then of course, the Maxwell thing with the deputy attorney general, who's also Trump's private lawyer, had been flying out to Florida. So he's done the worst thing you can do at a cover up. But I'm not being I'm not for successful cover ups, but I'm just saying analytically, cover ups fail when you start to take one step after another that increase the questions instead of resolving them, right? It's sort of like I compared it in one of the newsletters, the Bulwark. It's like a drama. You need to bring the curtain down and say, it's over. There's nothing more. If you tantalize people and say, well, I don't know what Maxwell's going to say. Maybe has different information. People say, okay, well, what's she going to say? Well, actually, what's in the files? How does that compare with Maxwell? They've opened the door so much that I think people are genuinely curious, and legitimately so.
The
So I think it's hurting him. I don't know that it brings him down. It doesn't feel, I don't quite see how it plays out that way in terms of like a Watergate type thing, but I think it can do real damage to him. And again, I come back to the original point I made, partly because it's such a horrifying set of crimes that Epstein and Maxwell were involved in, and Trump was right by them. He may not have participated, obviously, but he certainly knew what was going on. That's very clear now from a lot of the data that a lot of the evidence we've been able to put together. He knew what was going on. He didn't care. He couldn't care less about these girls. He cares about the fact that Epstein, made him annoyed him by taking a couple by quote stealing them from Mar-a-Lago. He never said what's supposed to make striking to me. I'm sorry I'm going on so long, but I've been whipped up
at
on
first
this.
I thought it was like some Downton Abbey thing. Gentlemen don't steal other gentlemen's butlers, but it sounds like it was about young women.
He said, and Trump, again, after saying generally something about he's poaching our people, Trump the next day said, yeah, actually, it is the women. And it was this one woman, Virginia Giuffre. And so Trump has kind of he can't quite close the door. He knows what happened. I think there's a little bit of a sort of almost subconscious sort of just trying to deal with it. He knows what could still come out. He probably knows what's in those files that he doesn't want out. I
Well,
mean,
he's it,
so
it,
it's really but the degree to which one point I would just make from a human, think about this from a human point of view. Mike Pence, not a favorite of mine, and it obviously wasn't involved in this a little bit. Mike Pence, when he was asked about this, he said he thought the files should be released, but he prefaced what he said by saying, "But first of all, we need to say." We need to express sympathy and empathy for the victims. I mean, they were treated horribly, and we did not do them justice. And they deserve accountability. And he was, fairly eloquent minute or two. And honestly, whether you're sincere about that, I think Pence was, or just being a politician, that's the first thing you say, right? What's most striking to me, it doesn't even occur to Donald Trump to say that. It doesn't like his mind, he thinks right away, am I in trouble? And I knew Epstein. I got to figure out a way of explaining that I kind of broke relations with Epstein. That he then, confuses that or garbles that or doesn't have a credible account of that exactly why he did or what he did. But it's all about him,
but
and he thinks of himself as Epstein's buddy, not as anyone who should have any human concern for these girls who were so horribly mistreated.
it's been rare for matters to get out of hand for Trump. But in this case, in the California version is the Streisand effect, which is when Barbara Streisand found out her property was being routinely surveyed, I think by the Coastal Commission. She objected, and that made people who didn't even know she had coastal property start to pay attention. The same thing is happening now with
I
every
agree.
new iteration of Trump's excuses. And you have members of Congress, Republican, even MAGA members of Congress, who are saying, no, 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 we really want to know what's going on. In some cases, joining with Democrats to do the same thing. The numbers of people who are now interested in this, who, as you point out, were not necessarily interested before, are through the roof. 70, 80, 90% want to see what's going on. So in that sense, the containment has failed Trump, which is a rare thing to see.
Yeah, and I do think again it's partly because of the nature of this of the horrible the crimes were, how close Trump was to it. I mean, that's another thing. It's one thing to have, I don't know. Anyway, this is an unusual set of events, I think. But as you say, he keeps on talking, and when he says new things, it raises new questions, and it contradicts something he said a week before. And then you've got to figure out, well, when did he, break relations with Epstein, and how much did he know at the time, and what about the birthday note, the 50th birthday card, and so forth. So I think more will come. How much damage it's doing, it's hard to know, but it's certainly doing damage. I think, and I think especially because it's one of the few issues Trump tried to play the card he always plays. The media's after me. We need to rally. I need everyone to rally behind me. We're fighting the horrible left wing, Obama, Biden, Pelosi, blah, 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 right? And he tried that, of course, but it wasn't quite credible in this case, partly because MAGA world has been so interested in the Epstein thing, but partly because things kept coming out. And so, yeah, I think it's not over. And a lot depends on what we now learn and how much. I don't know if we'll ever quite know what's in some of those files, but I want to make just one point on that, though. People sometimes forget. We slide over the fact that there are these files, and Trump, why won't Trump make them public? I mean, think about that for a minute. Over the birthday card, which is very damaging if you read it like a grown up and think what they're really saying to each other. It's really sick and disgusting, but can't prove anything with it, I suppose. That's already come out. So he's already had a certain amount of damage. the fact that he won't release the files tells me there's something worse in the files, right? I mean, otherwise he would say, release it. There'd be some embarrassing notes in there from, some testimony. Someone said, someone told them that Trump knew more about Epstein than we realized, whatever. There'd be all that kind of stuff, but nothing much, presumably, that one could prove or that would if that were the case, he would release it. He would take the hit for 2 days and figure, okay, story's over. So it would actually, honestly, what would the follow up be? We're not in a position to judge who exactly should be indicted and so forth at this late date, if anyone. But the fact that he won't release it tells me he suspects or maybe knows that there's pretty damaging stuff in those files. I think I can't hear. Are you muted or am
I'm
I?
sorry.
Oh,
Here we go. Yeah, I said, well, we'll try to do a speed round and get to some other points too. But just today, the Fed is not changing interest rates. This was after Donald Trump showed up at the new Federal Reserve building in a hard hat with Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, and a list of supposed numbers about cost overruns, which Powell pointed out to him were for a building that had been finished 5 years ago. You can legally only fire a Fed chairman if you find corruption. And clearly that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. This is of a piece with how Trump goes after people in a very granular sense. I'm going to get you because you are thwarting me, down to, to levels of federal employees you wouldn't think possible. But so this is being played out in a global economy, in a situation where tariffs are being tossed up in the air and brought back down again, where numbers may change and then revert to what they were a year and a half or 2 years ago. So how do you see what's going on with the Fed and with the tariffs and with some of the disillusionment in the economy that we see with Trump now when prices are going up, especially of coffee and, oh yes, eggs?
and beef, I guess, right?
And beef, yes.
Seems like, and incidentally, one reason beef prices are so high,
Your
we import
breakfast
a
is
lot
more
of
expensive.
beef from Mexico and from Brazil, and those are two of the countries that he's slapped big tariffs on. So of course the prices have gone up. The Brazil tariffs, incidentally, are insane. We have, I think, a positive balance of trade with Brazil, but he doesn't like the fact that they're trying to prosecute their former president who tried to stage a Trump-like coup. And so he's putting tariffs on them. There's no economic reason for those tariffs at all. So I don't know. I'd say the markets strike me as being a little too complacent about the fact that Trump won't really do any damage. He won't really fire Powell. He won't really destroy the credibility of the Fed. He won't. He'll take the tariffs back down. What do I know? And who knows where the economy goes? We have a very big economy and a very strong economy, and there's a lot of innovation and there's a lot of technological advancement, and it's resilient. So it'd be foolish to. It can survive a lot, right? We could survive some foolish tariffs going from 5% to 10% or something like that. But I don't know. The degree of uncertainty and chaos strikes me as it could well freeze some investment. Inflation is high enough that the Fed can't really feels it can't bring interest rates down. That keeps housing, causes problems for the housing market. So I kind of think we'll see problems from Trump's management of the economy, but we haven't quite seen them yet, to be honest. And so or too many of them yet. So it's a little hard to tell. What strikes me is that he has a pretty good economy. We're not at war. And even so, his approval rating has drifted down to about 42, 43, 44 from the 49, 50 it started at. Some of us would like to see it fall faster, honestly, and a little shocked that voters aren't more upset about some of the policies. But it is drifting down, and I don't know that one would have predicted that. I mean, that is to say, if you have pretty low unemployment and the stock market at record highs, and as I say, no foreign wars, and you might say that expect the president to be doing a little better. So I think there is dissatisfaction with a bunch of his policies that's reflected a little bit in these polls.
Some of the polling numbers that are much worse and more precipitously than drifting are the numbers regarding immigration,
Yeah.
and taking a hit on both sides. Across the board, people's regard for immigration and for immigrants has risen, and the deploring of some of the tactics that we see, particularly here on the West Coast in California. We see 3 or 4 or 5 people without badges, without uniforms, covering their faces, going after one person, which just from a efficiency point of view isn't very good. We see people being swept up because of brown skin who turn out to be citizens, who turn out to be legal residents, who turn out to have some status here already. We also see people in the hallways of immigration courts, these ICE officers who are waiting to take into custody people whose status has just been legalized by an immigration court. And I think that that may be perhaps a longer term effect, certainly on Latino voters, as we've seen in the polls, and as Americans begin to see in their own communities the effect of immigration sweeps that take away the woman who runs the little corner bodega, or the guy who has been servicing your car or washing your car for years, or the guy who employs 5 or 6 people in his plumbing business. These are the sorts of things that drip, drip, drip begin to make an effect, I think, on voters, which is why you see the results in the polling.
I mean, I think that's true. That should be the case. Also, agriculture, hospitality. I mean, there are big industries that depend on an awful lot of immigrants willing to work hard, and they're obviously they're going to suffer and are suffering already. I mean, I'm horrified by what he's doing in immigration. But we shouldn't even call it immigration. I mean, immigration is there are policy disputes about immigration, what the numbers should be, legal, illegal, how you treat people at the border. That's even complicated. Obviously, Biden got hurt by that, feeling like the border was too porous and all that. But we're not talking about immigration. We're talking about deportation. And they've been clear about that. I mean, they had those signs at the Republican convention, right? Mass deportation. And people didn't quite take it seriously. Some did, of course, I suppose, and liked it. And here we are trying to do it. And I'm just horrified. I mean, the way people are being treated, rounded up, gone after. So usually some American citizens get swept up. But what about the ones who aren't, the people who had temporary protected status, even if they didn't have it? They've been here 15, 20 years, are working hard, they've got families. And what are we doing? Why? What's the point? I mean, the point is that they don't like having all these dark-skinned people in this country, if we could be honest, I believe. There's no economic reason. They're not taking jobs from Americans. They're not on welfare if they're not, they're paying taxes. Their kids seem to be doing well, basically, and assimilating to America. Those fears from 20, 30 years ago that we're going to have two Americas, has not really worked out. Thank God. We're very good at actually sort of assimilating people. So it's pure, and the cruelty of it, the masked, ICE officers, and now a massive infusion of funds from the reconciliation bill. And God knows who's going to be hired. They're not going to follow strict protocols and guidelines in terms of qualifications and vetting. I'm going to guess they're going to just get whoever wants to show up and give them incentives and they have quotas and they have numbers they want to hit. And so these people, I mean, it's the worst possible way to think about it. If you give people numerical quotas, who are they going to go after? They're not going to go after the gang members who would take a lot of work and effort to go find and dig out, and it could be dangerous. Honestly, they're going to go after the most vulnerable people. But you just round them up, and they once came in illegally 120 years ago, and off they go. And the cruelty of it all. I think I got to say honestly, people should be more appalled. I'm a little upset that people. I think there has been a pretty good negative reaction, justified negative reaction. I argued with a lot of Democrats over the early months of the administration that this was an issue Democrats shouldn't be scared of. I mean, Biden did take a hit on the border, but deportation is different from border control. These people are not, you're in LA, right? The Border Patrol is going through MacArthur Park. That is not on the border. What are they doing there? And why is ICE going to 7-Elevens and shopping centers and so
Stephen
forth?
Miller told them to.
What? Yeah, totally. Exactly. But I mean, it shows how much it's about deportation. It's not about keeping the country safe. It's not about protecting us from criminal gangs. It's not about a sort of slightly out of control situation at the border, which maybe we had a bit of in 2023, early 24. It's not about any of those things. So I think people should be more appalled, and I hope they are. And I hope, as you sort of correctly said, that there are particular groups that will be particularly affected by it in terms of the actual economy and housing and agriculture and other things, and the corner bodega. But people should also be appalled because it's un-American. I mean, this is really terrible. What's happening, in my view, on the streets of major cities, and really in LA. And in the LA, why is LA first? LA didn't want this. The citizens of LA didn't want this, mostly. It's LA's first because it's a democratic city and a democratic state, which Trump said basically, right?
But I mean,
it's really terrible.
When you talk about people speaking up, we have had the protests, the demonstrations. You see videos of a woman down in a very prosperous city down the coast near San Diego who is in a parking lot. I mean, this is a white woman screaming at ICE agents to show their faces as they're taking away a worker. And a federal grand jury in Los Angeles was asked to return charges in 38 indictments against people who had protested or tried to interfere with immigration enforcement actions. And most of those were refused. The grand jury said no to all but 7 of them. I think some of them were thrown out, the charges, and some were reduced. But there is some, I think, a critical mass of resistance among some populations in some places.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, honestly, I mean, obviously legal resistance and peaceful resistance, but it's very important. No, I've seen it. It's very admirable. I think what a lot of people are doing, and they're doing it for other people whom they don't know personally some often, but they think it's wrong, and it is wrong. And I hope it really comes home. And this is we're 6 months in. They're not letting up. They've got their $1 million goal for the $1 million million person goal for the year. They've got all this money flowing in. So I think we have to really, this is what they're going to be doing. I hope there's a huge reaction against it, honestly, because I think it's just terrible for the country. And uh, so I hope, I hope maybe they'll be forced finally at some point to pull back. Stephen Miller's a fanatic on it, I think. And Trump, I don't think Trump personally maybe is quite so fanatic. And he takes occasionally, he gets phone calls from his buddies and Big Ag or in the hotel business, and he realizes, ooh, this is kind of bad for them. And he sort of says something, maybe we should cool it a little bit. But then this is a case where they've created a Frankenstein, honestly. And unfortunately, the Frankenstein's getting a lot more money for the next few months. So I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. And it really is terrible for our country and terrible for those
There,
people, obviously. I mean, yeah.
Sometimes Trump policies get overturned in court, but sometimes now the Trump administration has done its own reversals. The OMB that had halted payments to the National Institutes of Health for researchers across the country, within the same 24-hour cycle, they said, no, 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 we're going to restore this because they'd been lobbied by Congress, by patient advocacy groups. The same thing happened with funding and information from the Pentagon that used to go to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And Pentagon said, no, we're not going to share it anymore. And now they say, we're going to be sharing this information again. Obviously, this was in the wake of Texas floods. So without acknowledging any wrongdoing, they're sort of sneaking it in under the radar and saying, yeah, we're going to restore this information or these funds. Is this what we're looking at as 3.5 years more of backpedaling, or is this all going to be subject to who's pushing the buttons, or as you say, who's calling Trump and 2 o'clock in the morning among his buddies saying, hey, lighten up on this?
I mean, I'm happy to see some backpedaling. I'm happy to see a tiny bit of congressional resistance. I'm happy to see resistance from outside groups, but we're also seeing an awful lot of accommodation and timidity on the outside. And I fear that, again, it will get worse before it gets better. The executive branch of the United States government is powerful, as you know, in a whole bunch of areas. And when it decides to go after other institutions in a serious way, sometimes there's a big reaction, and then members of Congress get upset and they pull back a little. But the amount of damage that's been done, for example, at NIH, even though they're pulling back a little, the amount of damage that's been done, obviously abroad with AID and stuff. But I mean, I'm here in Washington, near Washington, so I see this maybe a little more closely. The whole federal government. It is not going to be the government we had. I mean, if Trump has a bad midterm and then if Trump Republicans either turn away from Trump or lose badly in 2028 or both, and a good Democrat, someone I would like, takes over, he is going to have a very difficult job in 2029. He is not inheriting the way we're used to people. Clinton came in after Bush and Bush after Clinton and Obama after, and they inherited a government that had its problems, but that was, functional, and 95% of the people pivoted and decided they would understood they would carry out the policies of the new government. The new government had policies that were within the broad mainstream, and Congress had a big say. So a lot of policies were negotiated. We're in a very different world. I mean, the degree to which the key agencies like the Justice Department, Homeland Security, have been weaponized, and decent people. I know so many people at Justice. They wanted to stay. They thought they could help make things better. They've been there for 10, 15, 20 years. They're committed to they've turned down many job offers, more lucrative law firms. They wanted to stay, and now they can't take it. I mean, it's just they don't want to be part of it. I mean, it's terrible what they're doing, and they won't make the arguments in court that the Trump administration wants them to make. Those people are leaving. Trump's changing the civil service rules. He's going to bring in a whole bunch. They're bringing in a huge number of loyalists in some of these agencies. I mean, there. The damage is going to be hard to turn around. So I'm worried. I think 3.5 more years of this is going to do damage. I hope there are more backward steps, as you were saying, compared to the forward steps. But I'm afraid they've still got an awful lot of momentum going in the forward direction, and not enough big institutions are standing up to them.
It sounds like we will need our own Marshall Plan for democracy if the opportunity ever presents itself. You speak of timidity. Just today, Brown University agreed to pay $50 million and to clean up its act when it comes to DEI. We saw that Columbia, $200 million. People are in a sense paying the ransom to get back into the game. There are lots of words you can use to describe it, but these two are institutions which, because they are at the top of the ladder, the judgment must be in the Trump administration. If we can get these guys to knuckle under, everybody else will follow suit.
And I'm afraid that, they're bullies, and bullies do have an instinct often for where the weaknesses are, and they go after them. And then if you can get a few people to go along with your bullying, then a lot of other people think, well, I guess I can't really stand up. I mean, if Columbia and Brown can't stand up. Now, the good news is smaller colleges and universities don't have the money to pay that kind of money to the government, and maybe they just kind of float below the radar. But I think the success of the bullying, relative success with universities, law firms, business, and the failure to stand up. I mean, I think universities, honestly, some of them, they're under a lot of pressure, obviously, but there are much more powerful businesses and others that are also not standing up and incidentally, they could band together, right? I mean, someone said to me, it's a problem of collective action, Bill. You don't understand, this is a political science term, a social science term. You don't understand. It's hard for them to coordinate. And it's like, really? Don't they have things like the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable, and the universities have big associations, and they can coordinate if they want to coordinate to fight. But this is where a government that's relentlessly going after you in this way can do a lot of damage, and it's not so easy to stand up to them. And so this is where, again, I worry a lot about the next 3.5 years. And I keep coming back to the fact we're only 6 months in. Now, hopefully, there are a lot of setbacks. There's public dissatisfaction. The institutions that stand up get supported in court by the courts. And Trump, hopefully we've seen the worst of it. Hopefully the
Really?
pace of damage slows down. But I don't think we can be confident of that.
Is it because people have figured out where they can push back, where it's going to have the most effect, or has the Trump administration essentially, shot off all the barrels it promised it would?
So that is a very good question. We don't know, and I think a lot will depend on what people do. I think we're still at, look, it's only 6 months in, and so one can imagine scenarios where finally some Republicans in Congress say this is too much. The public really rises up. The people who are on the boards of businesses and universities and civic institutions say this is unacceptable. People in the government say it's unacceptable. But again, they knew what they were doing. They had a plan. They really want to, change things, and they feel no compunctions about using any methods. I just the degree to which we have a government that is now, relentlessly trying to bully other institutions, change the internal workings of the government, obviously, Justice Department and so forth, but also relentlessly bully external organizations, including states and localities. So look at LA. I mean, if Karen Bass doesn't think she needs the National Guard or Marines in LA and doesn't want ICE doing the kinds of activities they're doing, and the governor doesn't want them doing it, and the city council of LA doesn't want them doing it, why are they doing it? I mean, there's no, you know what I mean? That's what's striking to me. And they've, look, I respect the mayor and the governor, and they're pushing back, and there's some court cases and so forth. But I've got to say that so far the pushback hasn't been, I'm not blaming them. It's just they're in a weaker position perhaps, but the federal government can be powerful when it really goes down this path, unfortunately.
We have seen hiding in plain sight behavior by Trump that is profiteering behavior that would have felled anybody else. Almost 60 years ago, 50 years ago, Jimmy Carter had to put his poor little peanut farm in a blind trust so he could run for president. And now we have the the business that Trump has been doing on the public's business overseas, doing his personal business at his golf courses, accepting a secondhand jet from Qatar. And a story this week said that the money to refurbish that is probably going to be coming in part from a fund that's supposed to be refurbishing Minuteman missile silos for our nuclear arsenal. At what point, or have we gone past outrage that America will never be capable of official shame anymore? Or is this too something that will be rebuilt, if at all, over decades?
Oh, I think it can be rebuilt. Look, we've had a lot of bad things in our history, and things have gotten worse on, let's say, race relations, especially in the South between, I don't know, 1880, let's say, and 1920, 1930, and horrible things happened. And eventually, there was a reaction, and there was legislation, and there were brave people who took it on. And so, no, I think, and after Watergate, there was actually a pretty big reaction, and a lot of norms were established and laws were passed, which were pretty healthy and have kept things less bad for the last 40, 50 years. But now those have all collapsed. But I think you make you hint at a very important point, which is the assault is across the board. It's an assault on all the standards we had against corruption. It's an assault on the rule of law. It's an assault on the judges and the courts. We've seen that very recently. It's an assault on having a Justice Department that is cushioned off, separated off to some degree from the president's personal will. It's obviously the assaults on the universities and so forth. So it's all happening. And that is how successful authoritarians tend to operate. They sort of see that if you try to go you might think, gee, it's better to focus on one or two or three things. It's easier, but it's actually the opposite. The more you go after everything, the harder it is for the opposition, for civil society, for the pro-democracy forces to get their balance. And you're fighting here one moment and here another, and there are 150 court cases you're trying to manage, and resources get strapped, and people decide, I just 4 years is a long time. Maybe it's better to accommodate now. So the breadth of the authoritarian assault is dangerous.
We're about to go to some of your questions, and you can put those in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them with Bill Kristol. But before we do, I want to get your assessment on what you make about how Trump has been handling Putin and Netanyahu recently. He looks like he's tougher. It's not 50 days now. It's maybe 2 weeks for Putin to come around. And with Netanyahu, you've got to feed the people of Gaza. How serious is this? How much of it is theater? And will he even remember tomorrow what he said yesterday?
We don't know. I personally am pleased that he's learned maybe for a while some lessons of skepticism and Putin, and maybe he can do a little more and to help stabilize and resolve even the situation in Gaza. But if you go back and forth and you change your mind every 2, 3 days, of course, I'll welcome the fact if he's changing his mind in the right direction. But ultimately, it's not a serious foreign policy. Ultimately, foreign leaders look at it and think, you know what, I'm just going to wait a week or two and he'll go in a different direction. They're not stupid. And other foreign leaders who want to be on our side, who want to work with us, think, I don't know, he could just turn around tomorrow. So are we going to spend a lot of time doing this? So when you're the world leader and you go into this kind of sort of chaotic and willful foreign policy, when you don't see the importance of long-term relationships and long-term strategies and policies, everyone else also has to kind of react to go into kind of a defensive crouch, and it's not good. I mean, I hope there's much less damage than I feared there might be, and it may be that we get a little lucky, honestly, and he decides he can't trust Putin and he doesn't sell out Ukraine as much as I thought he might 6 months ago, and gives Ukraine a little more time to fight and to do well, and gives Europe a little more time to react. But it's I wish one could count on it more. But I would say that is one of the areas where I think it's a little less. I mean, in February, March, it just looked like we were just pulling out of the world order and it was all going to kind of collapse. I think that's been less. It's gone less dramatically in that direction than I feared it would. But I still worry. Yeah.
A lot of the discussion we've done here in the past few weeks is whether Trump's proclamations that he's going to be cracking down on anti-Semitism at universities and elsewhere has been not so much about anti-Semitism, but about, using that as a club to enforce his will in places. And we have a question from Harvey about the House of Representatives approving amendments to the DoD Authorization Act for the National Defense Authorization Act on anti-Semitism prevention. Is that going to get bipartisan support out of the Senate.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly. And I generally I do think yes, he has used this as a cudgel against. There were problems. There are problems, and there are limited ways which the federal government can help address those problems. And he's just used it as a cudgel to beat up the universities and to get them to bend on all kinds of other issues. And it's not even clear what it would mean. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what is Brown going to do that's different? They're not going to fund certain programs, and maybe they're going to have one more administrator who's dedicated to making sure that Jewish kids on campus aren't harassed, which I am in favor of them not being harassed. They should already be doing that. If they're not doing it, the federal government probably has a role, depending on what the legal situation is, in helping make sure that that's not happening. States and localities, of course, do that a lot too. But again, we have a legal system. If people are being unjustly harassed, you can go to court. The federal government can also intervene. You can also appeal to the education department. There's none of that. Are there factual findings showing that Brown should have done A, B, or C and didn't do D, E, or F? If there's been hearings, has there been testimony? No, it's all a show and sort of a show trial, really. And I say this as someone who doesn't like what happened on campus at all, after October 7th, and who's worried about some longer term trends there. So I honestly think Trump is hurting the cause of fighting anti-Semitism. He's made it a bludgeon, a cudgel to use against people he doesn't like. And it's also, honestly, the exaggeration of it now is so great that I think a lot of Americans probably sort of look at it and say, look, I don't want kids to be harassed, but I mean, is it really true that it's intolerable to be a Jewish kid at Harvard? I don't think so. I know a lot of them,
Amy,
So, I mean,
no, I'm sorry. Amy says that the Brown settlement goes to charities selected by Brown, and they didn't admit any wrongdoing. But I thought I read something about that they've agreed to deal with DEI programs in a fashion that I guess suits what it is.
well, that's the other thing. Are these things carefully worked out agreements that really are targeted at problems, or are they just for Trump to declare victory? They get some money often that Trump will see in the university cases who gets to decide where that money goes. And, look, in the real world, I think Brown will probably look a lot like it does today after this settlement.
We have
I don't think we're going to have, Trumpist courses particularly dominating the Brown curriculum. But I do worry about the precedent it sets is terrible. It means that 2 years from now, I mean, let's just say 2 years from now, there's some anti-Semitic incident at Brown. Totally possible, right? It happens. There's like 20,000 kids on campus. And some jerk does something, and some kid gets harassed. Just an excuse, Trump. Oh, hey, you didn't solve the problem. Hey, I want $50 million more, and also I want you to get rid of these professors whose teaching I don't like. I mean, the curricular stuff with Columbia is really bad. So again, it's not as if in the real world, if you make in a business deal, you know this very well. In the real world, if you make a settlement, it's a settlement. It's legally binding. It's done. It's memorialized. There are ways to follow up if people violate either term. That's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a bully accepting a concession for now, totally able to go back and try to get more concessions 6 months or 18 months from now.
Let's see if we can get some shorter answers, Bill, so we can get to more.
Sure.
Ellen and others say the Democratic Party seems to be lacking in leadership. We've seen polls that as bad as Trump is, the Democrats are the worst they've been in 30, 40 years. So how to deal with Trump and MAGA without good Democratic leadership? So where do you see the future of the leaders and the rising momentum for the Democratic Party?
I think it's hard. They were Democrats expected to win. They're reeling still. I'm not too worried about in the short term. I think the 2026 election is going to be about Trump, and the Democrats' main argument is going to be: do you want to give Trump continued unchecked power? Isn't it healthier to have a Congress that can check Trump? That's 90% of the argument, and it doesn't matter whether Hakeem Jeffries is a brilliant leader or a pretty good leader or a so-so leader. I think for 2027, 2028, for the presidential cycle, you need to have a Democratic Party that's rethought some issues, that has new leadership, younger leadership. I think there's some very impressive people at the state level. We're going to elect, I think, Abigail Spanberger here in Virginia as our governor. In New Jersey, we'll have Mikey Sherrill. They're both excellent, I think. There'll be a lot of people running, competing. We'll see how they do. So I'm mildly optimistic about the Democratic Party. Short term, I think, they're in some disarray, but which is, annoying sort of day to day, week to week. You'd like to see more vigorous opposition sometimes. But as I say, I don't know that it really is. I don't think it matters that much for 2026.
William wants to know about the redistricting going on for congressional districts now in Texas. and whether or not this is something that is strategically workable for Republicans, how it's going to play with Latino voters, and whether it's going to catch on.
I mean, they're going to try to do it. They may miscalculate. They may not pick up 5 seats. They may not pick up any seats. They might pick up one or two. Friends of mine think maybe a little more likely. But it shows again, they are here to win, and not just to win. They're not interested in going by the normal rules of the game. The rules of the game are, with a few very odd exceptions with court cases, every 10 years you redistrict, and that way it's a predictable thing. And you can't just, when you choose to, call your state legislature in and do another redistricting every 2 years to kind of jiggle the districts around to help your own electoral chances. And it tells a lot about how they approach elections. Are we confident there will be fair and free elections with this kind of attitude towards the rules of the game? Now, hopefully, we will have fair and free elections. And luckily, states have a lot to say about elections. So I think it's not so easy for the federal government to do it. But with compliant states like in Texas, red states, the degree to which things we have taken for granted, a kind of stable electoral system, a kind of rule of law. There are some squabbles about on the margin. I don't know that we can take them for granted over the next 3.5 years.
Are the 2026 elections in peril?
I think they'll happen, well, here I'll put the question just back to the way you asked me. If the Republicans redistrict 4 states and pick up 9 seats, and they end up with a margin in the House for 5 seats, we will have free and fair elections. You will vote, I'll vote, people will vote, the votes will be counted, the machines will be accurate. But will those exactly have been free and fair elections if they change the rules halfway through? And then what will they do, incidentally, in September of 2026 in terms of, deploying all the things they can do in the heat of an election campaign to sort of tilt the playing field further? So I worry about that.
Marcy wants to know what you think about George W. Bush's silence about Trump. Yes, he chose not to go to the White House for the dedication of a stamp about his mother, but that's sort of a negative and very subtle message. Is he not just inclined, should he not even speak out and say nothing about policies, but about just what we spoke about earlier, the damage to the institutions of democracy?
I personally think he should. He's got a theory about what ex-presidents should do. I think they would also say privately, we would just hurt because they don't, we just hurt the cause, because then it's us old guys, former guys fighting back against Trump. I don't buy that at all, but I would broaden the thing. Where's Condi Rice? Where's the entire Bush administration? Where are the former Republican attorneys general? They occasionally pop up. You see a little thing they say somewhere, but the Justice Department is being gutted and weaponized in a way that we have never seen. Incidentally, we didn't see it under Nixon. Why did Nixon not get away with Watergate? Because he didn't control the Justice Department, right? Elliot Richardson and Archibald Cox. Then they fired Richardson and Cox. But you know what? Bork took over and appointed Jaworski as the special counsel. And the whole legal cases went on. That's Nixon v. U.S. He lost the case that was brought by his own Justice Department, right? I mean, that's inconceivable today, right? Mike Ludig has been great. He's been a hero. He's one of the, how many people like him? Not that many, right? And everyone else is kind of, they're busy, they're doing their things. So I'm very disappointed by the Republican establishments. Some of them have gone along. Many of them privately don't like him, but they're not standing up and fighting.
Are they afraid of him?
Well, I don't know. I don't think they should be, really. A lot of them are wealthy 75-year-old people. What are they afraid of, really, But it's uncomfortable. They can rationalize. They can do more good privately talking, and sometimes they can. Incidentally, there's no universal rule that everyone has to be, sound like the Bulwark or something like that. But I think it sends a very bad signal, because if they don't fight, then your civic leader in Wichita who likes Bush and respects Bush. So Bush hasn't really said anything, so maybe I'll just keep a low profile. And we will have to go along and get along, or the president of a university, or a business head, as I said, or others. So I think it's been damaging not to have more high profile types, especially Republicans, fighting Trump.
Frank would like to know what you think of the likelihood of a third Trump term, and whether he would even try it, or whether he's just talking again through his MAGA hat.
I'm sure he's thinking about it and keeping the option open. I don't think it's out of the question. I think he's smart in the sense he knows that he wants to keep it as a possibility, to keep the kind of pressure on people not to cross. And the moment he becomes a lame duck, he becomes less powerful. J.D. Vance isn't quite the same, and so forth. If he's healthy and stuff, I don't rule it out, and I'm not sure he couldn't bludgeon the Supreme Court into sort of, oh, well, it's not really our business, let the voters decide. And you could imagine that happening.
So this is back to the balls and strikes that Justice Roberts said he would call, that this would just be, he'd be calling it at the plate. And even though the Constitution says no.
I mean, they're calling balls and strikes in a way. It's sort of like the pitcher has now, moved the mound in 10 feet, and he's, you know what I mean? And they're taking bats. They're forcing some of the hitters to hit with, inferior bats, and the umpire's standing there looking, saying, "Well, that one's a ball. That one's a strike." It's like they were not dealing with people playing in good faith, And so the whole ball, so the courts, the district courts have been good, and I really admire a lot of these judges who are trying to do their best, but they're not being backed up the way they should be by the Supreme Court.
Several people want to know what you think of Kamala Harris' announcement today that she won't be running for governor of California.
I mean, it's up to Californians, but no, I think it's good. I think we need fresh blood, and I don't mean to, she's a young woman, a youngish woman, so I don't mean to like cast her into, retirement or something like that. But I just think I would be happy in 2027, 28. I'm happy to have Spanberger in Virginia. I'm happy to have Mike and Cheryl in New Jersey. They're in office. They're not totally outsiders, but I think more younger and newer candidates from diverse backgrounds. Spanberger and Cheryl in 2018, one of them left the CIA, one of them left the Navy because they were so alarmed by what Trump was doing in his first term. We need more. We are going to get more candidates like that, I think, in this cycle, and I think that's a good thing. And I think, so I'm in favor of. I think people want outsiders. They want change, and so maybe there are some very good career politicians, but I think. Yeah, I think some of people like that stepping aside. Because I wish some of the older members of Congress, honestly, whom I personally like, they're my friend. I mean, they're people I know, right? They're closer to my age to be than than the young members. But they should step aside.
So you think that by not running for governor, she's not going to be running for president again?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
There are a lot of questions still about Ghislaine Maxwell and Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, including Ruth wanting to know about a backlash if Maxwell were released from prison, pardoned, commuted, and whether or not he would pay a political price, as he seems not to have paid a political price for so much in his career.
Yeah, including these other disgraceful pardons, including January 6th. I mean, we barely even, it's like everyone's forgotten about that.
And then
literally 1,500 people who stormed the Capitol, No, I don't. I think he would. I mean, I think it's so horrifying, and it would so obviously be a deal and an attempt to not to, to justify not releasing the files, I suppose. I don't know that it would work. I mean, what if he literally releases her? So what is she going to talk? Is she going to say that this person did this and this did that? And then someone else going to say, well, wait a second, that's not the way someone else says it. Can we look at the files? I mean, I think this is where the cover-up isn't working well for him, because the more you do one thing, it raises questions about other things, right? So, but I don't know if he'll have the nerve to pardon her, but he probably wants to.
Marilyn wonders what you think about the efficacy of ordinary people protesting. We talked about that with immigration. Like, do protests help?
Yes, I think so.
Is this administration subject to any kind of pressure at all?
Well, I think members of Congress and members of state legislatures and governors are subject to pressure, and I think they can become more, firm in opposing bad things. And I think it's good for the country. I mean, look, we need to make it through these next 3.5 years. I went to the King's Day protest here a couple of months ago, 6 weeks ago, whenever that was. And, it was actually heartening. I mean, there were a lot of people came, and it was not going to change anything in the very immediate future. But and they were good spirit. They were, people weren't, they were sort of good neighborly spirit, I'd say, among the people who were there. And it makes you think, you know what, we can maybe make it through this. And we still are Americans, and we get along with each other, and we care about the country. And people were taking a couple of hours out of a weekend day to come to something. So no, I'm very much, I think it's very important. Partly it's psychological, reassuring us that we still have people, and the many tens of millions of people in this country who want to get through this next 3.5 years and get us on track.
Miriam wants to know what you think of the Mamdani candidacy in New York for mayor, because Republicans have been very eager to say this is the new face of the Democratic Party. See, we told you so. They're all like this. And Democrats are saying, yeah, well, Democrats come in all flavors.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have 3 big elections in November: Spanberger in Virginia, Cheryl in New Jersey, and Mamdani in New York. They're actually all about the same. New York's slightly smaller, New York City than New Jersey and Virginia, but three about similar sized electorates. So that's the Democratic Party. I'd say two moderates and one left winger, if you want to call it progressive. And there is a balance. There are different elements in the party. I'm not panicked about it. I wouldn't have voted for him in the first round, but I didn't like some of the other candidates too much either, honestly. So that's a problem. And I think New York will be okay.
Let's see the question from, I think it's from EA, among other people, about the old guard Republican idea of smaller government. Well, essentially, people are saying be careful what you wish for, it might come true, because here we have a number of programs which have been targeted, discussed for years, and now they are disappearing or being reduced substantially. Is it time for a rethink of that argument? And are Americans the ones who are going to make it after the midterms, when they see cuts to Medicaid, when they go to a national park and find out that the toilets aren't working and won't be because there's nobody to take care of them?
Yeah, I think there'll be a reaction, and there should be a reaction. And again, the way it's been done and the thoughtlessness of the cuts. I came to the Reagan administration, to Washington to work in the Reagan administration. I was in the education world. We proposed cuts in education spending. I think they were reasonable. I don't think they would have destroyed American education. Maybe some of them were unwise, honestly. I haven't gone back and looked at all of them. But the way in which they did it with Doge and just the kind of across the board and the foolishness of a lot of it and the short term, the idiocy of it in terms of some of the biomedical stuff and the scientific stuff, which clearly were helping our economy. I think there's still a case for, reforming parts of the federal government, obviously, and reforming federal programs. But the way it's been done, I think, has been very damaging. And I think there will be a reaction.
The reaction from voters that will trickle up to members of Congress and to
Yeah.
those races?
Yeah, and that's again a case that's very important for voters to really talk to. I mean, they're on recess now. People need to go find these members of Congress, and if they're not having town halls, badger them. I mean, not physically, but try to ask for appointments with them at their offices, ask for appointments with their staff, make a lot of phone calls, make them understand that people don't like whatever policies they don't like, that their member might have voted for. And if even if it's not your district, you can go to another district to make this point. So I think it's very important to have the public pressure.
Really quickly, is the Epstein controversy a foot in the door for some members of Congress to begin parting company from Trump policies?
I hope so. Yeah, I think that's one reason I've been so interested in pushing it, honestly, because I do think it's a case where even Republicans look at it and think, oh, God, I don't want to defend Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
We've got a couple of minutes, and as you know, we always try to end on something upbeat. So if you can deliver a hopeful message, maybe a message that has some action items in it that people can say, I think I'll go do that.
Yeah, no, I feel like I've been a little too downbeat in this conversation, but I mean, it's a rough time. I do think so I'll take 2 points. One, we shouldn't kid ourselves. It's going to be rough. I find sometimes I wake up and I think, God, I mean, I've been here in Washington 40 years, and this is what it's come to, and we're not going to get out of it right away. And there's real damage. It's, as I said, that's going to be done. You can't wish that away. I don't think there's no point being in some fantasy land. Having said that, it's a very strong country. People love it, and I think we need to remind ourselves of what's best about this country and about our history and the progress we made, and really get about working to save it and to improve it. And honestly, because there were obviously weaknesses, otherwise we wouldn't be in this condition we're in with Trump and MAGA and everything that's happening. So people can figure out what their best use is, volunteering here or demonstrating there or working on a campaign over here. But I think this is the moment to act. This is not the moment to sit and watch and wring our hands or think there's nothing we can do. I mean, we got to really work hard for these next 3.5 years, maybe beyond that, actually, to really get this country on track.
Will people be galvanized to be in support of things rather than just against Trump and his policies?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but I think the first thing is to stop the bleeding, if you want to put it this way, and then to say, okay, now how do we fix a lot of these policy areas, and how do we fix our institutions? They're not working very well. They aren't. The FBI didn't do a very good job with Epstein, or the Justice Department didn't, and that was 15 years ago too. So I'm very much in favor of fixing the institutions, but at the same time, we can't let Trump destroy everything that's been built up.
Bill Kristol, it's always good to hear from you. The bad news and the good news, the hopeful news that you've been able to deliver to us here at the end, where we like a little dollop of icing on the cake, whatever flavor that is. So anyway, we thank you so much. Hope we get you back pretty soon to talk about things as they emerge, certainly after the autumn and after Labor Day, as politics begins to rear its head in Washington more
I know. Well,
actively.
thanks, Pat. It's been great being with you all. And you all are an example of civic activity. So I think it's all these things are so important to do over the next, as I say, not just months, but years.
Well, the congratulations are due to all the people who are watching and supporting these programs, because they're the ones who are engaged and take messages like yours out into their own communities with some hope and some energy. So thank you again.
Thanks.
And thanks to all of you who have been watching us, listening to us. Next week, we have Madeline Brand talking with Jonathan Weissman about American anti-Semitism, being Jewish in the age of Trump, a topic we just touched on briefly here. And after that, Ron Brownstein with Larry Mantle about life during wartime, politics in an age of convulsion. You can get the newsletter, follow everything that we are doing here. I'm Pat Morrison. I thank you so much for joining us this evening.